not by referring to some kind of mysterious center. Now,
could I ask a question about the constraints?
yes.
So how constraining are those factors actually are? Like if we are really constrained by other sociological whatever factors.
We are fated, not even constrained.
Right.
Then
where's this active force from?
Yes.
Like,
Yes. I think a simple idea. Let's look at our ethnicity. You know, each one has its own ethnicity, and in a society, some ethical discrimination, you know, racism is a problem. So I happen to be a race that is being looked down upon. Instead of saying, "My gosh, I should get rid of it," I will no longer be this particular race. And yet, the Confucian idea is that ethnicity is something so integrated, so much a part of you, it can serve as a vehicle for self-expression, for self-realization. I'm part of an age cohort, and I cannot change. I cannot, you know, when we're young, we want to grow very fast. And when we turn 17, 20, we hope we not grow. And for an athlete, if you turn 25, your career is over. And that sense is one which is fading, which is very much constrained by society. On the other hand, if we say, I'm 17, I act in terms of my strength as a 17. Some of the things I know I cannot do. For example, I cannot be really wise, so I would give people in their 50s and 60s some advice how to live. I know I cannot do that. On the other hand, I have the strength to do things that people in 25 and others will not be able to do. And I have the awareness of the world in a way much more significant or sophisticated than people in their 13 and so forth. So that age, which is constrained, right? But at the same time, that constraint, instead of saying that's something I want to get rid of it, I want to transform it. Get rid of it or to be liberated from it, but I want to transform it. In other words, that becomes, I would call it, enabling constraint. So that constraint is not simply an action factor.
But what we can do is still defined by what we can't, right?
Absolutely. But the emphasis on what you can do. And don't worry too much about what you cannot do because the constraint. That's the reason why you think from things near at hand. You think as a concrete living person. And that concrete living person is not interchangeable with other people. And so you take full measure of what you have. You do the best you can. And I want to generalize it a little bit more about two sets of values. Again, it's a very schematic. These values are all great values, but sometimes they're in common. Sometimes they have different emphasis. And normally we are seasoned to think one kind of values is universal, but the other one is not. For example, we all agree, I'm involved in this at all, and also that freedom, rationality, rights, especially human rights, legality, due process of law, especially the idea of the process, not just the legal constraint, but also dignity of the individual. I don't think any one of us would argue against these values as universal values, or at least universalizable. Though some people say human rights cannot be fully developed in some cultures different. But even if you accept that kind of relativism, you still consider it as very positive. But there are other values. They're absent with this set. For example, if we were free, we need to be aware of justice or fairness. If fairness is no longer part of it, freedom may lead to some kind of licentiousness. You have to respect, you have to be fair. You know, that's one of the great contributions of John Rawls in his study of the theory of justice. If we are rational, we know rationality is absolutely critical. We know we shouldn't forget the importance of sympathy or empathy or compassion. We know the importance of rights. Immediately we know rights and responsibility are integrated. You just cannot have rights without responsibility. And of course, if you have legality, and you should also understand the importance of civility. If you just focus on law, you will not be able to transform yourself as a moral human being. So you have to have a sense of responsibility. And of course, dignity of the individual and a harmonious society should be. And let's say justice, sympathy, responsibility, civility, and social harmony are also universal values. To say they are Asian values, as the other values we call them universal values, is a very limited and limited judgment, and also a wrong judgment. Historically, we should say that these great values that developed in the West came from the Western experience, then they become universalized. I would simply say the global significance of local knowledge. Something originally is very local. The development of freedom is very complicated. From the French Revolution, and over a very long period of time, eventually we allow slaves to be free, and for a long, long time, the people who didn't have property couldn't vote, and women, of course, couldn't vote, and so forth. But we expand suffrage, we expand the realm of liberty. But justice, of course, is critical. Sometimes people contrast liberty on the one hand and equality on the other. So all the other values that we consider Asian values ought to be understood. These values are rooted in Asia, but they're also globally significant. So what we need to do, the message here, is a dialogue among core values. Dialogue among all these basic values. We need to have a real discussion between freedom and justice. We should have a real discussion between the dignity of the individual and harmonious society, not to mention rights and responsibility and rationality and sympathy. We need to have dialogue. We need to have discussions. So one society, of course, all these values exist in all societies. It's not possible to imagine any one of them totally absent. And yet one society puts a lot of emphasis on the one at the expense of the other, and we need to have a discussion. Now one discussion which is highly sensitive, politically sensitive, I don't know which one is more inclusive. If you look at rights, there's political rights and economic rights. On the one hand, freedom, ability to express oneself, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of religion, and the freedom of thought, ideas is cherished. All these freedoms are cherished as absolutely critical for a democratic society. But then sometimes we tolerate economically disadvantaged people. We have no obligation in a way to deal with the homeless. We can help them, but there's no legal constraint. The society will have to do something. Healthcare right now, for the first time in a major democracy, is able to do it. How long will it take? Whereas if you visit France, England, Taiwan, all these areas, everybody's covered, and actually functions very well. That's true with Canada. So different societies may have different emphasis. And so if you put more emphasis on economic rights,